Welcome to Stoic Vivu, where ancient wisdom meets modern life. I'm here to help you discover how 2,000-year-old Stoic philosophy can transform your daily experience, giving you practical tools to thrive no matter what challenges come your way. Today, we're diving into something that might surprise you. The path to true freedom isn't just about what you start doing, it's about what you stop doing. You wake up each morning in a world that previous generations could only dream of. You have access to information, opportunities, and comforts that would astound someone from Marcus Aurelius's time. Yet somehow you find yourself feeling stressed, overwhelmed, and constantly chasing something more. You scroll through social media and feel inadequate. You work harder but feel less satisfied. You accumulate more possessions but experience less contentment. Here's what the ancient Stoics understood that we've forgotten. The good life isn't about adding more to your plate. It's about removing what poisons your peace of mind. Epictetus, who went from slave to one of history's wisest teachers, said that the key to flourishing is to decide what you want to be, then do that work. But he wasn't just talking about action. He was talking about elimination. Think about a master sculptor. Michelangelo didn't create David by adding clay. He revealed the masterpiece by removing everything that wasn't David. Your character works the same way. The person you're meant to become is already there, hidden beneath layers of toxic habits that cloud your judgment, drain your energy, and steal your joy. The Stoics identified specific patterns of thinking and behaving that keep us trapped in cycles of dissatisfaction. These aren't just bad habits. They're invisible chains that we've grown so accustomed to wearing that we don't even notice their weight anymore. But once you recognize them and learn to break free, everything changes. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, wrote extensively about this in his private journal. Despite having unlimited wealth and authority, he understood that true freedom came from mastering himself, not others. He documented the daily practices that helped him rise above the very temptations and pressures you face today: comparison, complaint, the endless hunger for more. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest citizens, discovered that prosperity without philosophy is just sophisticated misery. He learned to distinguish between having enough and wanting more, between real security and the illusion of control that money promises. Epictetus taught that our opinions about things cause more suffering than the things themselves. He showed students how to reclaim their mental energy by choosing what deserves their attention and what doesn't. In the next 7 sections, we're going to explore the specific toxic habits these ancient masters want you to eliminate from your life. We'll discover why complaining, even to yourself, weakens your character. We'll learn why showing off your self-improvement actually sabotages your progress. We'll uncover the liberating power of having no opinion about things that don't matter. Most importantly, we'll replace these draining patterns with ancient practices that build genuine strength, peace, and resilience. By the end of this journey, you'll have a clear roadmap for breaking free from the invisible habits that have been holding you back, using wisdom that has guided humans through challenges for over 2 millennia. 1. How to break free from the complaint trap that destroys inner peace. You're stuck in gridlock traffic on the I-405 in Los Angeles, already 15 minutes late for an important meeting. The air conditioning in your car decides this is the perfect moment to stop working, and you can feel sweat starting to form on your forehead. Your phone buzzes with a text from your boss asking for your ETA. The frustration builds as you watch the minutes tick by, and before you know it, You're muttering complaints under your breath about the traffic, the city planners, your unreliable car, and maybe even the weather. This scenario plays out millions of times every day across America. We complain about traffic, about our jobs, about politics, about the weather, about our relationships. It feels natural, even necessary. After all, aren't we just acknowledging reality? Isn't it healthy to express our frustrations? Marcus Aurelius would say no. In his private journal, later published as Meditations, the Roman emperor wrote something that might shock you. Don't be overheard complaining, not even to yourself. Notice he didn't just say don't complain publicly. He said don't even complain to yourself in the privacy of your own mind. This isn't about toxic positivity or pretending problems don't exist. Marcus Aurelius faced genuine hardships, military campaigns, political betrayals, family tragedies, and the enormous pressure of ruling an empire. He wasn't living in a bubble of privilege disconnected from real problems. So why would someone who dealt with life and death decisions daily warn against something as seemingly harmless as complaining? Because Marcus understood something we've forgotten. Complaining is a form of mental poison that weakens your character and destroys your inner peace. Every time you complain, you're training your mind to focus on what's wrong rather than what you can control. You're reinforcing neural pathways that make you more likely to notice problems and less likely to notice solutions. Consider this. When you were stuck in that traffic, complaining about the situation, what did it accomplish? Did the traffic move faster? Did your car's air conditioning start working? Did your meeting get rescheduled? Of course not. The only thing complaining accomplished was making you feel worse about a situation you couldn't change. But here's what Marcus Aurelius would have done differently. Instead of complaining about the traffic, he would have recognized it as an opportunity to practice one of the most powerful Stoic exercises, accepting what you cannot control while focusing on what you can. You can't control the traffic, but you can control your response to it. You can use the time to practice deep breathing, to think through your presentation, or to call your meeting to give them a realistic update. You can't control your car's mechanical problems, but you can control whether you let them ruin your entire day or whether you see them as a minor inconvenience in an otherwise blessed life. The Stoics made a crucial distinction between acknowledging problems and complaining about them. Acknowledging a problem means recognizing reality clearly so you can take appropriate action. Complaining means emotionally dwelling on problems in a way that increases your suffering without improving your situation. Let's say you're dealing with a difficult colleague at work who constantly interrupts you during meetings. Acknowledging the problem means recognizing their behavior and its impact on your productivity. Taking Stoic action might involve speaking with them privately, adjusting your communication style, or if necessary, involving your manager. Complaining means venting to other colleagues about how rude and unprofessional this person is. Rehashing their latest offense over dinner with your spouse, or lying awake at night mentally rehearsing all the things you wish you had said to them. The difference is profound. One approach preserves your mental energy and channels it towards solutions. The other drains your energy and reinforces feelings of powerlessness and victimhood. Marcus Aurelius faced this choice constantly. As emperor, he was surrounded by people who disappointed him, betrayed him, or simply failed to meet his expectations. He could have spent his days complaining about incompetent generals, corrupt senators, or ungrateful citizens. Instead, he chose to focus on his own actions and responses. In his journal, he wrote, How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does. This isn't about being oblivious to your environment. It's about choosing where to invest your mental and emotional energy. Start paying attention to how often you complain in a single day. Notice when you complain out loud to others, and more importantly, notice when you complain silently to yourself. You might be surprised by how automatic this habit has become. You're waiting in line at the grocery store, and the person ahead of you has forgotten their rewards card, slowing down the process. Your immediate mental response might be frustration and internal complaints about inefficient people holding up your day. But what if instead, you use those extra 2 minutes to practice gratitude for having access to abundant food, or to simply breathe deeply and appreciate a moment of stillness in your busy day? The Stoic practice isn't about becoming passive or accepting injustice. When action is needed and possible, take it decisively. But when you're facing circumstances beyond your control, traffic, weather, other people's behavior, unexpected delays, complaining only adds suffering to situations that are already challenging enough. Marcus Aurelius discovered that inner peace comes not from having a complaint-free life, but from having a complaint-free mind. When you stop feeding your frustrations with mental complaints, you'll find that your natural resilience and problem-solving abilities emerge more clearly. This practice requires patience with yourself. You've probably been complaining automatically for years, so don't expect to transform overnight. Start small. The next time you're tempted to complain about something trivial, a slow internet connection, a long line, a delayed flight, pause and ask yourself, is this complaint helping me in any way? Or is it just adding unnecessary suffering to my experience? Ultimately, breaking free from the complaint trap isn't about denying reality or pretending everything is perfect. It's about reclaiming your mental sovereignty and choosing responses that build your character rather than erode it. 2. Why showing off your growth actually stops your progress. Picture yourself at a coffee shop in downtown Chicago, laptop open, working on a personal development plan you've been crafting for weeks. A friend sits down across from you, and within minutes, you're enthusiastically explaining your new morning routine, your meditation practice, the life-changing book you're reading, and the ambitious goals you've set for the next quarter. You pull up the productivity app on your phone, showing them your streak of completed habits. You describe in detail the journaling technique you've discovered and how it's already transforming your mindset. Your friend nods politely, but you notice their eyes glazing over slightly. You leave the conversation feeling energized, proud of your commitment to growth, and satisfied that you've shared something meaningful. But here's what you don't realize. You've just fallen into one of the most subtle and destructive traps that derails genuine self-improvement. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who understood human psychology better than most modern experts, warned his students about this exact behavior. He said, "Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. In other words, don't put on airs about your self-improvement, be about it. Don't just talk about it." But why would talking about your growth be harmful? Isn't sharing your journey with others a form of accountability? Doesn't discussing your goals make you more likely to achieve them? The research on this topic might surprise you, and it aligns perfectly with ancient Stoic wisdom. When you talk extensively about your plans, goals, and self-improvement efforts, your brain experiences something psychologists call goal substitution. The satisfaction you get from talking about your intentions tricks your mind into feeling as though you've already made progress. The social recognition, the positive feedback, and the identity reinforcement you receive from describing your growth plans actually reduces your motivation to do the hard work of implementing them. You've probably experienced this without realizing it. Think about a time when you excitedly told everyone about a new fitness routine you were starting, a skill you planned to learn, or a project you intended to complete. Remember how good it felt to share your vision and receive encouragement. Now think honestly about what happened next. Did you follow through with the same enthusiasm you had when talking about it? Epictetus understood this psychological trap because he lived it. As a student of philosophy, he watched countless people become intoxicated with the idea of being wise rather than actually becoming wise. They loved discussing philosophical concepts, debating ethical dilemmas, and impressing others with their knowledge of Stoic principles. But when faced with real challenges, illness, financial hardship, social rejection, their philosophical talk crumbled because it had never been transformed into genuine character. The Stoics had a saying, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." When you constantly talk about beginning new habits or starting fresh approaches to life, you're often avoiding the difficult work of ending the behaviors and thought patterns that actually need to change. Consider what happens when you encounter a setback in your self-improvement journey. Let's say you've been telling people about your commitment to waking up at 5 a.m. to exercise, but then you oversleep for 3 days straight. If you've built your identity around being someone who's working on personal growth, you'll likely feel compelled to explain the setback, justify it, or immediately announce a new plan to get back on track. This explanation cycle becomes its own form of procrastination. Instead of quietly adjusting your approach and getting back to work, you spend mental and emotional energy managing other people's perceptions of your progress. You become more invested in appearing committed to growth than in actually growing. Epictetus taught a different approach. He encouraged his students to work on themselves with the same quiet persistence that a gardener tends to plants. A gardener doesn't announce to the neighborhood every time they water their garden or pull weeds. They simply do the work day after day and let the results speak for themselves. Imagine if you approached your personal development this way. Instead of telling your friend about your new morning routine, you simply started doing it. Instead of explaining your meditation practice, you just meditated consistently until the calmness and clarity it produced became evident in how you handled stress. Instead of describing your fitness goals, you quietly transformed your body and health until people began asking you what you'd been doing differently. This doesn't mean you should never discuss your growth or seek support from others. The key distinction is between seeking genuine guidance and seeking social validation. When you're facing a specific challenge and need advice from someone with relevant experience, that conversation serves your growth. When you're sharing your plans primarily to receive praise for your good intentions, that conversation often undermines your progress. You're at a family dinner, and your relatives are discussing their various struggles with health, relationships, and work stress. Your cousin mentions feeling overwhelmed and asks if anyone has suggestions. You could launch into a detailed explanation of the Stoic practices you've been studying and how they've revolutionized your approach to stress management. Or you could simply share one practical technique that has helped you, demonstrate it briefly, and offer to send them a resource if they're interested. The second approach serves your cousin's actual needs while avoiding the trap of using their question as an opportunity to showcase your personal development journey. It also preserves your mental energy for the real work of applying these practices in your own life. Epictetus lived this principle completely. Despite being one of history's most influential teachers, He never wrote anything down himself. His teachings only survived because his student Arian took notes during his lectures. Epictetus was so focused on embodying philosophy rather than promoting it that he didn't even prioritize preserving his own legacy. The most powerful form of influence is transformation, not explanation. When you consistently apply Stoic principles to handle challenges with grace, respond to criticism with wisdom, and pursue your goals with quiet determination, you inspire others far more effectively than any motivational speech or detailed description of your personal development plan. In essence, true growth happens in the space between intention and action, not in the space between intention and announcement. When you resist the urge to broadcast your self-improvement efforts, you preserve the energy and focus needed to actually improve. 3. The ancient art of having no opinion and why it changes everything. You're scrolling through your phone during your lunch break in downtown Manhattan, and suddenly you're bombarded with a stream of information that would have overwhelmed an entire generation just decades ago. Breaking news about a political scandal, your friend's vacation photos from Thailand, a heated debate in the comments section about a celebrity's latest statement, an article about a new scientific discovery, someone's opinion about the best pizza in the city, and a viral video of a cat doing something amusing. Your brain, evolved for a simpler world, tries to process all of this information. You find yourself forming opinions about the political scandal even though you only read the headline. You feel a pang of envy about your friend's vacation. You get drawn into the celebrity debate, typing out a response before deleting it. You bookmark the science article to read later, but know you probably won't. You make a mental note about the pizza place. You share the cat video. By the time you return to work, you feel mentally exhausted despite having done nothing productive. You've spent 30 minutes consuming information and forming opinions about dozens of topics that have absolutely no impact on your actual life. This is the modern condition, drowning in information while starving for wisdom. Marcus Aurelius, who had access to the best information networks of the ancient world and genuine responsibility for decisions that affected millions of lives, wrote something that could revolutionize how you approach this daily information overload. You always have the power of having no opinion. If it's pointless gossip, if it's trivia, if it's something that doesn't concern you, if it's something you have zero control or influence over, just let it be. This isn't about being ignorant or disengaged from the world. Marcus Aurelius was one of the most informed and engaged leaders in history. This is about recognizing that your mental energy is finite and precious, and that most of what demands your opinion doesn't deserve it. Consider what happens when you encounter information about a controversy happening in an industry you don't work in, involving people you've never met, regarding decisions that won't affect your life in any meaningful way. Your mind immediately starts forming judgments. Who's right? Who's wrong? What should happen next? You might even share your opinion with friends or on social media, contributing to discussions that ultimately lead nowhere productive. But what if you simply chose to have no opinion? What if you acknowledged the information, recognized that it doesn't require your mental engagement, and redirected your attention to something that actually matters in your life? Epictetus taught that it's not things that upset us, it's our opinions about those things. This principle becomes especially powerful when you realize that having an opinion is a choice, not an obligation. When you encounter information that would normally trigger frustration, anger, or anxiety, you can simply choose not to form an opinion about it. Let's say you're commuting home on the subway in Washington, D.C., and you overhear two passengers having a loud argument about a local zoning decision. Your immediate reaction might be to listen closely, form opinions about who's right, and perhaps even feel compelled to join the conversation. But applying Marcus Aurelius's wisdom, you could simply recognize that this zoning decision doesn't affect your life, that you don't have enough information to form a meaningful opinion, and that engaging mentally with this argument would only drain energy you could use more productively. This practice of selective opinion forming is particularly crucial in our age of social media, where algorithms are specifically designed to provoke strong emotional reactions. Every platform profits from your engagement, and the easiest way to generate engagement is to present you with information that triggers outrage, fear, envy, or indignation. You see a news headline designed to make you angry about something happening in a different state involving people you'll never meet. Instead of automatically clicking and forming an opinion, you can pause and ask, does this require my opinion? Can I influence this situation? Will having an opinion about this improve my life or anyone else's life in a meaningful way? Most of the time, the honest answer is no. This doesn't make you apathetic or disconnected. It makes you strategic about where you invest your limited mental resources. Marcus Aurelius discovered that having fewer opinions actually made him more effective at handling the situations that truly required his attention and judgment. When you stop wasting mental energy on trivial matters, you have more clarity and wisdom available for the decisions that actually shape your life. Consider your relationships, your work, your health, your personal growth, and your family responsibilities. These areas genuinely benefit from your thoughtful opinions and careful consideration. When you stop forming reflexive opinions about celebrity scandals, political drama you can't influence, and social media controversies, you create mental space for deeper thinking about what actually matters. This practice requires distinguishing between information and wisdom. Information is data about what's happening in the world. Wisdom is understanding what deserves your mental and emotional investment. The Stoics valued wisdom far more than information, because wisdom actually improves your life while information often just creates the illusion of being informed. You're at a dinner party in San Francisco, and the conversation turns to a complicated international situation that none of the guests has any expertise in or influence over. Instead of feeling pressured to contribute your opinion to seem informed, you can simply listen, ask thoughtful questions, and recognize that not every topic requires your judgment. This doesn't mean becoming a passive observer of life. When issues directly affect you, your family, your community, or areas where you have genuine expertise and influence, engage fully. Form thoughtful opinions, take action, and make your voice heard. But most of what competes for your attention doesn't meet these criteria. The ancient art of having no opinion is really the practice of mental sovereignty, taking conscious control over what you allow into your mind and what you choose to think about. It's recognizing that your attention is your most valuable resource and protecting it as carefully as you would protect your financial investments. When you master this practice, you'll find that the opinions you do form are more thoughtful, more grounded, and more useful. You'll have more mental energy for creative thinking, problem solving, and meaningful conversations. You'll feel less overwhelmed by the constant stream of information and more confident in your ability to focus on what truly matters. The world will always try to convince you that everything is urgent and everything deserves your opinion. The Stoics understood that wisdom lies in recognizing that most things don't. For, from talking to transforming, the reading habit that builds character. You're at a networking event in Austin, Texas, chatting with a colleague who mentions they're struggling with managing their finances. "I really need to get better with money," they say with genuine concern. "I know I should be saving more, investing wisely, and understanding how compound interest works. It's been on my mind for months." You nod sympathetically and ask what steps they've taken so far. They pause, looking slightly embarrassed. "Well, I've been meaning to read some books about it. I even bought a couple on Amazon. They're sitting on my nightstand, but I just haven't gotten around to actually reading them yet." This conversation happens millions of times across America every day. People identify areas where they want to grow, express a genuine desire for improvement, and even take the first step of acquiring resources to help them learn. But then they stop. The books remain unread, the courses stay unpurchased, and the podcasts get bookmarked but never played. They continue talking about their goals while avoiding the simple but transformative act of actually learning about them. Epictetus, who dedicated his life to teaching practical wisdom, understood this human tendency perfectly. He observed that many of his students were more interested in appearing philosophical than in becoming philosophical. They loved discussing abstract concepts and debating theoretical scenarios, but when it came to the daily work of reading, studying, and applying Stoic principles to their actual challenges, their enthusiasm mysteriously vanished. The gap between intention and action reveals something profound about human nature. We often mistake talking about our goals for progress toward our goals. We confuse consuming content about self-improvement with actually improving ourselves. We treat good intentions as if they were accomplishments. But here's what the Stoics understood that modern culture often misses. Reading isn't just about acquiring information. It's about transforming your character. When you consistently read books that challenge your thinking, expand your perspective, and provide practical wisdom, you're literally rewiring your brain. You're replacing limiting beliefs with empowering ones, filling your mind with the thoughts of people who have solved problems similar to yours. Consider what happens when you encounter a difficult situation at work. Let's say you're dealing with a demanding client who seems impossible to please, and you're feeling frustrated and overwhelmed. If you've never read anything about conflict resolution, emotional intelligence, or Stoic approaches to handling difficult people, you're left to rely on your automatic reactions, which are often driven by emotion rather than wisdom. But if you've read even one excellent book on these topics, you have mental resources to draw from. You remember strategies for staying calm under pressure, techniques for understanding other people's perspectives, and frameworks for turning challenges into opportunities for growth. The wisdom you've absorbed through reading becomes available exactly when you need it most. Seneca, one of Rome's most successful businessmen and advisors to emperors, made reading a daily practice throughout his life. He didn't read because he lacked experience or expertise. He read because he understood that continuous learning was the foundation of continuous growth. He famously wrote, "Every new day is a step toward eternity," and he treated each day's reading as an investment in his character that would compound over time. The Stoics made a crucial distinction between passive consumption and active learning. Passive consumption is when you read something, find it interesting or inspiring, and then move on without changing anything about how you think or act. Active learning is when you read with the intention of transformation, looking for specific insights you can apply to your current challenges and long-term goals. You're commuting to work on the metro in Washington, D.C., And instead of scrolling through social media or checking the news, you pull out a book about emotional resilience. You're not reading to pass the time or to seem intellectual. You're reading because you recognize that the 30 minutes you spend absorbing practical wisdom each day will accumulate into significant personal growth over months and years. This daily reading habit becomes a form of mental strength training. Just as physical exercise builds your body's capacity to handle stress and challenge, intellectual exercise builds your mind's capacity to handle complexity, uncertainty, and adversity. The ideas you encounter in books become tools in your mental toolkit, available when life tests your character. But here's where most people get tripped up. They treat reading like a luxury rather than a necessity. They tell themselves they'll read when they have more time, when life gets less busy, when they finish their current project. They're waiting for perfect conditions that will never come. Epictetus taught his students that philosophy, which included reading and studying wisdom, wasn't separate from life. It was preparation for life. Every day brings new challenges, and every day you're either building the mental resources to handle those challenges wisely, or you're winging it based on limited experience and emotional reactions. The most successful people in any field share one common habit. They read consistently in their area of focus. Warren Buffett reads for hours every day, not because he lacks knowledge about investing, but because he knows that continuous learning is what keeps him sharp. Bill Gates takes reading weeks where he does nothing but absorb new information and perspectives. These aren't people who have time to spare. They're people who understand that reading is how you create time by learning more efficient and effective approaches to problems. Start treating books like consultations with the wisest people who have ever lived. When you read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, you're essentially receiving personal coaching from someone who successfully managed enormous responsibility while maintaining his character. When you read Seneca's letters, you're learning from someone who built wealth, navigated politics, and found meaning in both success and failure. The commitment to daily reading doesn't require massive time investments. 15 minutes each morning before checking your phone. 20 minutes during lunch instead of browsing social media. 30 minutes before bed instead of watching television. These small daily investments compound into thousands of hours of learning over a lifetime. Most importantly, approach reading as a conversation with the author. Ask questions as you read. Challenge ideas that don't align with your experience. Look for specific ways to apply insights to your current situations. Take notes on passages that resonate with you. This active engagement transforms reading from entertainment into education, from consumption into transformation. The difference between people who talk about their goals and people who achieve them often comes down to this simple habit. They read books about what they want to accomplish, and then they apply what they learn. 5. How to redefine wealth and escape the more trap forever. You're browsing through a luxury shopping district in Beverly Hills, window shopping during a weekend afternoon. You've just received a promotion at work and a corresponding salary increase that you've been working toward for 2 years. You should feel accomplished and satisfied, but instead, you find yourself looking at items that were completely outside your consideration just months ago. The watch that costs more than your previous monthly salary, the car that represents a year of your old income, the apartment listings in neighborhoods that were once fantasy destinations. What happened to the satisfaction you felt when you first heard about the promotion? Why does your increased income feel normal now, like a new baseline rather than an achievement? Why are you already calculating what you'd need to earn to afford the next level of lifestyle you're now considering? You've fallen into what Seneca called the most solvable yet most tragic form of poverty. Having everything you once thought you wanted but still feeling like it's not enough. Seneca, who was one of the wealthiest men in Rome, understood this paradox better than perhaps anyone in history. He wrote, "Poverty isn't having too little, it's wanting more." This statement seems contradictory at first. How can someone with abundance be poor? How can wanting more be a form of poverty when ambition and growth are celebrated as virtues? Seneca wasn't talking about people who genuinely lack basic necessities. He was addressing those who have achieved material success but remain psychologically impoverished because they can never feel satisfied with what they have. Consider the psychological trap you've created for yourself. Every time you reach a financial goal or acquire something you've wanted, your brain adapts to this new reality within weeks or months. What once felt luxurious becomes normal. What once felt like enough becomes the starting point for wanting more. This phenomenon, which psychologists call hedonic adaptation, means that external improvements in your circumstances provide only temporary increases in satisfaction. You save up for months to buy a car you've been dreaming about. The first few weeks of driving it bring genuine joy and pride. But within a month, that car is just your car, no longer a source of special satisfaction, just part of your normal experience. Now you're noticing other cars that make yours seem ordinary. The cycle begins again. Seneca experienced this firsthand despite his enormous wealth. He owned multiple villas, had access to the finest foods and wines, wore expensive clothing, and commanded respect throughout the Roman Empire. Yet he discovered that each acquisition brought only fleeting satisfaction before becoming invisible to his consciousness, replaced by awareness of what he still didn't have. But Seneca didn't conclude that wealth was inherently bad or that ambition was wrong. Instead, he developed a sophisticated understanding of the relationship between external possessions and internal contentment. He learned to distinguish between having wealth and being enslaved by wealth, between pursuing goals and being controlled by endless wanting. The key insight that transformed Seneca's relationship with money was recognizing abundance that already existed in his life. Not just material abundance, but the abundance of experiences, relationships, opportunities, and simple daily pleasures that he had been taking for granted while focusing on what he lacked. You wake up each morning in a warm, safe home with access to clean water, abundant food, and countless forms of entertainment and communication that would have seemed magical to previous generations. You can travel hundreds of miles in hours, access information about any topic instantly, and communicate with people anywhere in the world. You have freedoms, opportunities, and securities that most humans throughout history could never have imagined. Yet your mind naturally filters out these extraordinary gifts to focus on what you don't have. The bigger house, the better job, the more exciting vacation, the more prestigious title, the more impressive bank account balance. This isn't a character flaw, it's how human psychology works. But understanding this tendency is the first step toward freeing yourself from it. Seneca developed daily practices to counteract this psychological trap. Each morning, he would spend time reflecting on the abundance already present in his life. Not in a superficial gratitude exercise, but in a deep recognition of how much he had been given that he typically ignored while pursuing more. He would imagine losing various possessions or circumstances and notice how much he actually valued them when he considered their absence. his health, his friendships, his ability to read and think, his access to good food, his comfortable bed, his favorite books. These became sources of genuine wealth when he recognized them clearly instead of taking them for granted. This practice didn't make Seneca passive or unambitious. He continued building businesses, advising emperors, and pursuing meaningful projects. But he approached these activities from a foundation of contentment rather than desperation. He worked toward goals because they aligned with his values and served others, not because he needed them to feel complete or successful. You're having dinner at a restaurant in downtown Seattle, and instead of automatically scanning the menu for the most expensive items or feeling disappointed that you can't afford everything you'd like to try, you pause to appreciate the extraordinary abundance represented by this simple experience. Fresh ingredients from around the world, prepared by skilled chefs, served in a comfortable environment, shared with people you care about. This appreciation doesn't make you settle for mediocrity or stop pursuing improvement. It provides a foundation of satisfaction that makes your pursuits more enjoyable and sustainable. When you're not running from feelings of inadequacy or scarcity, you can pursue goals from a place of strength rather than desperation. The Stoic approach to wealth involves understanding the difference between wanting things and needing them. Most of what you want, the luxury items, the status symbols, the lifestyle upgrades, you don't actually need for happiness, health, or meaningful contribution to the world. Recognizing this distinction doesn't require rejecting these things, but it frees you from feeling enslaved by them. Seneca's ultimate insight was that true wealth is psychological, not financial. It's the ability to feel satisfied with what you have while working toward what you want. It's recognizing that you already possess the most valuable things: your consciousness, your relationships, your capacity for growth and contribution, and that everything else is just a bonus. When you escape the more trap, you don't stop achieving or growing. You just stop suffering while you do it. 6. Why power and money won't set you free, and what actually will. You're at a high-end business conference in Miami, surrounded by entrepreneurs who have built million-dollar companies, executives who control major corporate decisions, and investors who can make or break entire industries. The conversations revolve around deals, acquisitions, market dominance, and financial freedom. Everyone seems successful, powerful, and in control of their destinies. Yet, as you listen more carefully to these conversations, you notice something unsettling. The entrepreneur with multiple successful businesses mentions that he hasn't taken a real vacation in 3 years because he's afraid his companies will fail without his constant oversight. The executive talks about the political maneuvering required to maintain her position and how she can't trust anyone in her organization completely. The investor describes the pressure of managing other people's money and how market volatility keeps him awake at night. These people have achieved everything our culture tells us leads to freedom, yet they seem more constrained than ever. This paradox would not have surprised Marcus Aurelius, who experienced it firsthand as the most powerful person in the ancient world. Despite controlling a vast empire, commanding countless legions, and having access to unlimited wealth, Marcus wrote in his private journal about feeling trapped by his responsibilities and constrained by the very power that others envied. Posidonius, one of the great Stoic philosophers, witnessed a powerful illustration of this paradox when he observed the death of Marius, one of Rome's most successful and feared generals. Marius had conquered enemies, accumulated vast wealth, and wielded enormous political influence. He commanded legions and controlled the fate of thousands. Yet as Posidonius watched this supposedly powerful man die, he saw someone who was utterly powerless, controlled by his fears, enslaved by his ambitions, and tormented by his need to maintain dominance. Seneca, who understood this dynamic as both advisor to Emperor Nero and one of Rome's wealthiest citizens, made a haunting observation. The legions that Marius commanded had ultimately commanded him. The very source of his power had become his prison. This isn't an abstract philosophical concept. It's a practical reality you can observe in the lives of powerful and wealthy people today. Consider the tech billionaire who can't disconnect from his companies because he's afraid competitors will gain an advantage. The political leader who can't express genuine opinions because every statement might damage their position. The celebrity who can't live spontaneously because their every move is scrutinized and their privacy has been sacrificed for fame. You might think, but surely having more money and influence gives you more options, more choices, more freedom? In theory, yes. In practice, the psychological dynamics of power and wealth often create new forms of constraint that are more subtle but equally limiting than financial struggles. When your identity becomes tied to maintaining a certain level of success, you become afraid of losing what you've gained. When your lifestyle adapts to a high income, you become dependent on sustaining that income. When your social status depends on your position or wealth, you become invested in protecting that status. The very things that were supposed to liberate you end up controlling your decisions, your relationships, and your peace of mind. Marcus Aurelius, despite being emperor, wrote extensively about feeling like he had less control over his life than ordinary citizens. His schedule was determined by the demands of governing, his relationships were shaped by political considerations, his private thoughts were the subject of public scrutiny, and his family life was constrained by protocol and security concerns. Ernest Renan, a historian who studied Marcus Aurelius's life in depth, concluded that Marcus was probably the least free of all men. This wasn't because he lacked power or resources, but because his power and resources came with obligations and constraints that ordinary people never face. But the Stoics didn't conclude that power and money were inherently evil or that ambition was wrong. Instead, they developed a sophisticated understanding of what true freedom actually means and how to maintain it regardless of your external circumstances. Real freedom, according to Stoic philosophy, isn't the ability to do whatever you want. It's the ability to want what you're doing. It's not about having unlimited choices, but about making conscious choices that align with your values rather than being driven by compulsion, fear, or social pressure. You're sitting in a corner office in downtown Chicago, having achieved the promotion you've worked toward for years. You have a larger salary, more responsibility, and greater influence over important decisions. But you realize that your new position requires you to attend meetings you find meaningless, manage personalities that drain your energy, and make compromises that conflict with your values. The question isn't whether you have more power than before, the question is whether you're using that power in service of your authentic goals or whether the power is using you. True freedom comes from understanding what you can and cannot control, and then aligning your efforts with what's actually within your influence. Marcus Aurelius couldn't control the demands of being emperor, but he could control how he responded to those demands. He couldn't choose his circumstances, but he could choose his character. Seneca couldn't avoid the political pressures of advising Nero, but he could choose to maintain his philosophical principles regardless of external consequences. He couldn't control whether he gained or lost wealth, but he could control his relationship with wealth, using it as a tool rather than being used by it. The practical application of this wisdom involves regularly examining your motivations. When you pursue a promotion, are you seeking greater ability to contribute meaningfully, or are you trying to prove your worth to others? When you work to increase your income, are you aiming for genuine security and freedom, or are you trying to keep up with social expectations? When you seek influence, are you planning to use it for purposes that align with your deepest values, or are you pursuing it because it feels like what successful people should want? Real freedom isn't about having more money or power. It's about having a clear sense of what you actually value and the courage to pursue those values regardless of external pressures or social expectations. The Stoics discovered that the people who feel most free are often those who have learned to be content with what they have while working purposefully toward what matters most to them, independent of what others expect or admire. 7. Transform negative emotions into your greatest strengths. You're sitting in your apartment in Brooklyn on a Sunday evening, scrolling through social media, when you see that a former colleague just got promoted to the position you interviewed for 6 months ago. The one you really wanted. The one you felt qualified for. The one where you thought the interview went well, but you never heard back. Instantly, a familiar cocktail of emotions floods your system. Disappointment, envy, frustration, and that particular sting of rejection that makes you question your own worth and abilities. Your immediate impulse might be to close the app, distract yourself with something else, or maybe even post something on your own profile to remind people of your recent achievements. But what if this moment of emotional turbulence could become a source of strength rather than suffering? What if these uncomfortable feelings could be transformed into something that actually helps you grow? Marcus Aurelius faced this exact challenge on a much larger scale. As emperor, he was constantly surrounded by people who betrayed him, disappointed him, or simply failed to meet his expectations. He dealt with military failures, political setbacks, family tragedies, and the enormous pressure of leading an empire during turbulent times. He could have easily become bitter, cynical, or hardened by these experiences. Instead, he developed one of the most psychologically sophisticated approaches to emotional management in human history. In his private journal, he wrote, "The key is to be free of the passions, but to be full of love." This wasn't about suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. It was about consciously transforming destructive emotions into constructive ones. Notice that Marcus didn't say the goal was to eliminate all emotions. He distinguished between passions, which the Stoics defined as destructive emotional reactions based on false judgments, and positive emotions like love, compassion, and understanding. The Stoic approach isn't about becoming emotionally numb. It's about becoming emotionally intelligent. When you feel envy about your colleague's promotion, that emotion contains valuable information. It tells you that you value professional recognition and advancement. It reveals that you care about your career trajectory and want to feel valued for your contributions. The problem isn't the underlying desire. It's the way envy focuses your attention on what others have rather than on what you can do to improve your own situation. Seneca, who understood this transformation process deeply, taught that every negative emotion could be converted into positive action if approached correctly. Instead of letting envy consume your mental energy with resentment, you can use it as fuel for self-improvement. What specific skills does your colleague have that contributed to their success? What experiences or qualifications do they possess that you could develop? How can you position yourself more effectively for similar opportunities in the future? This isn't about denying your disappointment or pretending you're happy for someone when you're not. It's about acknowledging your emotions fully while choosing how to respond to them. You can feel disappointed about not getting the promotion, and use that disappointment as motivation to strengthen your qualifications for future opportunities. Consider what happens when you encounter criticism from someone whose opinion matters to you. Let's say you're presenting a project at work in Seattle, and your supervisor points out several areas where your analysis could be stronger. Your immediate emotional response might be defensiveness, embarrassment, or anger. These feelings are natural and understandable. Being criticized activates our fundamental need for social acceptance and recognition. But Marcus Aurelius would approach this situation as an opportunity for transformation. Instead of letting defensive anger poison your relationship with your supervisor or allowing embarrassment to undermine your confidence, you can transform these emotions into curiosity and determination. What specifically can you learn from this feedback? How can you use this criticism to produce better work in the future? What does this experience teach you about preparing more thoroughly for important presentations? The Stoics understood that negative emotions often arise from focusing on what we can't control, other people's decisions, past events, or circumstances beyond our influence. But every negative emotion also contains energy that can be redirected toward what we can control, our responses, our future actions, and our character development. You're dealing with a difficult family situation where a relative consistently makes comments that hurt your feelings and create tension during gatherings. Your natural emotional response might be anger, resentment, or the desire to avoid family events altogether. These emotions are telling you something important. You value harmony in your relationships and want to feel respected by people you care about. Instead of letting these emotions create ongoing suffering, you can transform them into compassion and wisdom. Maybe your relative's critical comments come from their own insecurities or disappointments. Maybe they lack the communication skills to express care in healthier ways. This understanding doesn't excuse their behavior, but it allows you to respond from a place of strength rather than reactivity. Marcus Aurelius regularly practiced this emotional transformation when dealing with difficult people in his role as emperor. Instead of responding to betrayal with vengeful anger, he chose to respond with protective wisdom. Instead of meeting incompetence with contempt, he chose to respond with patient guidance. Instead of reacting to criticism with defensiveness, he chose to respond with careful consideration of whether the criticism contained useful information. This transformation requires what Seneca called the view from above, the ability to step back from your immediate emotional reaction and see the situation from a broader perspective. When you're caught in the heat of anger, jealousy, or frustration, these emotions feel overwhelming and justified. But when you zoom out and consider what these feelings are actually telling you about your values and desires, you can use them as guidance for positive action. The practical technique involves a simple but powerful reframe. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "How can this experience help me become stronger, wiser, or more compassionate?" Instead of, "This shouldn't be happening," try, "What can I learn from this situation?" Instead of, "This person is making me angry," consider, "What does my anger tell me about what I value? And how can I protect or pursue those values more effectively?" This emotional transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't mean you'll never feel negative emotions. But with consistent practice, you can develop the ability to use every emotional experience, positive or negative, as fuel for personal growth and character development. The strongest people aren't those who never feel difficult emotions. They're those who have learned to transform those emotions into wisdom, compassion, and purposeful action. Your daily practice for ancient wisdom in modern life. You started this journey learning about toxic habits that the Stoics wanted you to eliminate, but you've discovered something far more powerful, a complete framework for transforming your daily experience through ancient wisdom. Each story we've explored, from the traffic jam in Los Angeles to the family dinner in San Francisco, has shown you that your greatest challenges are also your greatest opportunities for growth. Think about Marcus Aurelius writing in his tent during military campaigns, developing the very practices you've learned today. He faced betrayal, loss, and enormous pressure, yet he used these experiences to become one of history's wisest leaders. Seneca built and lost fortunes, navigated dangerous political waters, and ultimately found freedom through the principles he shared with us across centuries. Epictetus went from slavery to becoming a teacher whose insights still guide us through modern challenges. These weren't perfect people living perfect lives. They were human beings who faced difficulties remarkably similar to yours. The difference was their commitment to daily practices that transformed obstacles into stepping stones and setbacks into comebacks. You now have 7 powerful tools for this transformation. When you feel the urge to complain, you can choose acceptance and action instead. When you're tempted to show off your growth, you can focus on authentic development. When information overload threatens your peace, you can practice the art of having no opinion. When you talk about goals without taking action, you can pick up a book and start learning. When the more trap threatens your contentment, you can recognize the abundance already in your life. When you chase power and money for freedom, you can understand what true liberation actually means. When negative emotions arise, you can transform them into strength and wisdom. But knowledge without application is just entertainment. The Stoics weren't philosophers who discussed abstract concepts in ivory towers. They were practitioners who used these tools in the arena of daily life. Your arena might be the subway in New York, the highways of Los Angeles, the office buildings of Chicago, or the neighborhoods where you live and work. Wherever you are, these ancient practices can transform your experience. Start small and be consistent. Choose one practice that resonates most strongly with you and commit to it for the next week. Maybe it's catching yourself before you complain and redirecting that energy towards solutions. Maybe it's reading for 15 minutes each morning instead of scrolling through your phone. Maybe it's practicing gratitude for what you already have instead of focusing on what you lack. The Stoics understood that character is built through daily choices, not dramatic gestures. Every time you choose wisdom over reaction, growth over comfort, and action over complaint, you're becoming the person you're meant to be. This journey of transformation never ends. It just gets more rewarding as you develop stronger habits and deeper wisdom. The ancient Stoics are still here to guide you through their timeless teachings, and you have everything you need to start applying their wisdom to your modern life today. If this video has inspired you to begin your own Stoic journey, subscribe to Stoic Vivu for more ancient wisdom that transforms modern life. Like this video if it provided value, and share it with someone who could benefit from these timeless practices. Your transformation starts with your very next choice.